Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to look at the world, look at the state, look at the town, look at all aspects of our life from a more conservative point of view than we have in the past. So we'll start with two of our guests that have been with us for a while. Let's start with an introduction.
Thank you, Al, for having me on the show. My name is Chris Wilson, current school committee member and 20-year resident of the town of Milford.
Yes, thanks, Al, for having me on the show as well. Ed Bertarelli, Republican town committee member and former state Republican official and member of certain boards. I just want to say, when you look at what's happening in the world, and like a country like the Ukraine, which is subjected to a savage attack, we take for granted the fact that we can be talking here with varied opinions in public, in an area that's supportive to spread, to disseminate information, opinion and information. And in some countries, apparently in Russia, such actions would result in a rather swift exit to somewhere. And as Americans, we take a lot of things for granted, our freedoms and our ability to move and everything else. So again, thanks. I think we have to always highlight that given what's going on in the world.
It's hard to look at the devastation. I mean, first of all, you don't have the right to invade, to take over somebody else's country. But in doing so, even animals value children. You know,
Probably more than humans sometimes, but yes, you're right.
but I mean,
Yeah, when you've displaced 4 million people.
7.5 if you count internal.
Yep.
So, and then completely have destroyed lots of their infrastructure. So, I mean, they're just going, even if and when they're able to get back into their country, the amount of devastation is so great that how do you rebuild?
Yep.
And Kiev was such a city. I mean, back when I used to, I mean, I haven't been there a lot, maybe been to Kiev 10 times, if that. The people had an energy to them. I mean, when you left Moscow, back in the Soviet Union days, it was gray and very, very rigid and formal. You got out to the republics,
Yep.
and you got to see people for what they were.
And then you had their 20-year, the Ukrainians' 20-year immersion in freedom. You saw entrepreneurs arising, which we'll get into some of the war tactics brought up by high tech and technology, which you're very familiar with. But some of the Ukrainian young people, you look at the country, which is, you look at the members of the Ukrainian parliament that have brought out the incredible number of women and young people. You have a country in Eastern Europe which traditionally had a rather conservative view on minorities, and you have a country where you have a Jewish president and a Jewish prime minister in the country. So it's very interesting. But I think Putin wisely, in his own mind, and I'm not saying this wisely in a good sense, but he was savvy enough to realize these countries, that freedom's almost a threat to him.
Yes.
And whether, obviously, it's a perverted sort of awful thing to think about, but when you're a despot, I guess any kind of sunlight or spotlight is dangerous to you.
Well, I mean, you think about reality. Last night we had an election in Milford. We'll talk about it later, but 9% turnout.
Mm-hmm.
But we got to vote. We got to make our minds up whether or not we wanted change.
Mm-hmm.
And did we want it bad enough to actually drive 1.5 miles and vote? When we were in the Soviet Union, there was 95% voting turnout because you had to. And, you know, it was like that Saturday night, remember, cheeseburger, cheeseburger, cheeseburger. What would you like to have for dinner? Well, I think I'll take the cheeseburger.
Yep.
So, you know, the toughest part, I always envision the East Germans, the DDR, as having the worst sense of reality because they got to see West German TV.
Mm.
You know, if you're in North Korea and you don't know anything else exists, that's one thing. But to see what really is out there.
Yeah.
Right. You see the freedoms of
Yeah.
the world, and
Yeah.
you want
Now-
those same freedoms.
Now, to give the Russian people even less credit, because for at least 20 or 30 years, they've had access to the Western media. They've had somewhat control media, but also, part of the media that was not pro-government. But you've seen Putin. I mean, first of all, go and look at what he did to one of the Ukrainian presidential candidates before. He poisoned them with a radioactive isotope. Look what he did in England with his famous, giving someone a cup of tea, and the next thing you know, they're again with this poison. So, I mean, there's been a pattern here. I mean, he went so low as to bomb a building, as you remember when the Chechen thing was going on. He bombed a Russian apartment, the KGB or whatever it is now, FSB did. They bombed a Russian apartment building and blamed the Chechens, and he actually did it. So, or the Russian forces did, to create a hysteria to. So, what does that tell you
Ed,
about someone?
Why are we so surprised?
Well, we aren't.
After Chechnya,
Yes.
after what went on there, okay, when you look at him taking that little piece, the Crimean Peninsula out of Ukraine, why are we so surprised that this guy is going to behave like a rabid animal?
Our behavior hasn't helped the situation because, number one, before, in the early history when Ukraine got its freedom, they had a significant number of nuclear weapons. We promised them, in turn for giving up the weapons,
we would protect them.
we would protect them. Then, when the Crimea thing happened, where's the protection again? And you had forces in the Ukraine who said, well, we want to be in NATO. Now, to give Putin his due, the Ukraine, the NATO would be a giant country under his underbelly, and you could see that in his mind as a provocation. But the fact is, maybe out of all of this, what's going to come is a heavily armed, neutral, just like Switzerland, a neutral Ukraine with a good army that no one's going to screw around with. Because I think they've obviously figured out that our guarantees are not guarantees,
right?
And they're paying for it with their lives. Not to say that the Russians aren't the total culprit.
17,000 Russians have died in this.
And then there's the number who have basically taken their uniforms off and left. And I guess the other thing is, which is scandalous, is most armies make sure that their dead are collected and buried. I mean, Chesty Puller in Korea made a situation like that where the bodies were. We carry our wounded out. We carry our dead and our wounded out. No one stays. But the Russians are just leaving them there, almost like, well, we don't want to report to the parents that they're dead.
I think my question would be: Have we as Americans, has the American administration done enough?
Yes.
Right. There are sanctions, right? But has the war changed? There are still Russian forces within Ukraine. There are still people fleeing the Ukraine for their lives. Yeah. So what more can we do?
Let me ask you a question.
Besides boots on the ground?
You willing to send your kids over there to defend the Ukraine?
That's a really tough question, right? But a military person signs up for that exact application, for that exact role, right? They know that when they sign up for the military, there's a strong possibility they're going to be put in harm's way. Now, the question is, by putting our young troops in harm's way, does that entice Putin to have his hand on the button? Right, and I think that's where the diplomacy aspect has to happen.
I think there's been a little too much of, and I've seen it on Fox, I've seen it on CNN, MSNBC, the major networks, which to me aren't even credible anymore. But what will this man do? What can we do? Whatever. The point is, he's been very clear at the beginning. He respects power, the application of power. And if you say, in his mind, like when President Macron calls him, he must be laughing at Macron, going, I have you on the phone for 45 minutes and you're going, well, you really shouldn't do this, Vladimir. You shouldn't do this. He's like, doesn't this guy get where I'm coming from? I'm coming from a KGB background, ruthless application of power. So when I go in, I annihilate a city, I blow up buildings, now they're hitting hospitals. When you do that, and I'm not advocating for American troops, I'm advocating, or U.S. troops or European troops, I'm advocating to give whatever they need short of troops. Planes, tanks.
See, and that I can support.
Oh, well, again, but again, what we have in the U.S. is people going, well, General Milley, who shouldn't even, to me, be on the Joint Chiefs of Staff after he botched up Afghanistan. I mean, literally.
Afghanistan got botched up?
Yeah. So he goes, well, planes would be a provocation. Well, no, Stinger missiles are a provocation that take out tanks.
I was going to say, wait a minute, javelins for boats, Stingers, for airplanes.
Now,
Right, we're supplying U.S. technology and
State of the art.
state-of-the-art technology and weapons, right? So
Yeah.
certainly it's
Yeah.
come to the advantage of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But I also look at if you were to have a troop buildup in those neighboring countries and we start flexing our U.S. muscles, our U.S. might, does that back Putin off? So not necessarily have to get
No.
troops in the ground, but we flex our muscles.
No.
We show that, hey, we mean business. We're going into help. And if-
Candidly, if I look at Putin's background,
No. Yep.
he was not the meekest, quietest KGB
yeah.
leader.
right.
You know,
He
when you
respects,
look at
he respects deep
Yep.
power applied, not
Right.
threatened.
Right.
A threat to like
mean-
a threat like the sanctions, the way that was mishandled. The sanctions should have been put in before he even thought of doing it.
Correct.
But
No.
Ed, I remember the
Yeah. Yeah.
picture where he showed himself without
Remember
the
that?
shirt on,
Right, yes.
holding
Riding
a
the horse.
panther,
Yep. Yep.
and they
Oh,
showed Obama holding a Chihuahua or a French poodle.
Yeah.
A little French
Well,
poodle
that was the
dog.
line in the sand in Syria.
Yeah.
Remember the red line that
Yeah,
never
but
meant
I mean-
anything.
Right.
He has never backed down to threats.
No, and you had a couple of the allies, especially Germany, which, but amazingly, if you look at the polls in Western Germany, has had a number of people who didn't like the United States. I think one of the highest. So it's amazing to think with their background and whatever, but they had always had this idea that, well, we're going to make it. We'll be the bridge between Russia and
the West.
And the West. Well, they found out what the bridge is, but I know. I think to Chris's thing, I don't think. No, I think the number one, the application of as much power to the people in the Ukraine. But again, when you see the type people, the Ukrainian people, the mayor of Kiev is the former world boxing champion. I mean, a guy 6'7". I mean, these people are like tough cookies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
no
but
doubt
Ed,
about it.
Look at history, the Iran-Iraq War.
Yeah. Well,
When Iraq invaded Iran, Iran kicked their backsides right until they hit the Iraqi border.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, the Iraqis were fighting for their home.
yeah.
And when you look at, if somebody invaded Milford, would you care why?
Well,
You'd grab a gun and you'd support Milford.
Correct.
And
well, not if guns are banned, but I mean,
Right.
that's the point.
Oh, stop.
Well, I mean, well, he just asked the question.
But I mean, realistically, when I look at the Ukrainians, one of the interviews I heard, the guy said, "Where can we go? Yeah, it's not like we're going to retreat and leave
No,
our
right.
country."
Exactly. You're
The,
going to defend
the
it at all
Canadians,
costs.
Canadians have sent over like volunteer battalions. Their best sniper has gone over. The Ukrainians have apparently an incredible woman sniper who's going out there, which are her identities disguised. But again, half measures from Biden. We are shipping things over, but it's like this. Well, the minute I heard that about the planes and everything else, Putin almost took that as a sign that, well, we're going to help them a little, a lot, a little, whatever we're going to do. But meanwhile, now they're battling, and you have to go. I think the end game, though, is this: how does, and I don't really care, but how does Putin come out of this in a better place? Because number one, the war is apparently going to drag on, because the Ukrainians are never going to give in, no matter what. There's a giant country, but the thing is, the sanctions and everything else, Putin is basically going to be a pariah. He'll never be able to travel out of Russia because of the war crimes that are going to be prosecuted against him. So what's his end game? His end game, he's not going to be stronger than he was before because his economy started being wrecked. His military's been shown that,
But that's what scares me, Ed. When if
why?
we really back Putin into a terrible corner,
Wait a minute, though. But now you're using the theory of you let a bully do what he's going to do. That's the point. When
no.
when you
What I
start
was going to
thinking that
finish
way-
is if we really back him into a corner,
Yeah.
and he crosses the line,
Yep.
you gotta pull the cord. Because if somebody like Putin crosses the line,
Yes.
and you say, "Oh, you shouldn't have done
Exactly. You're exactly right.
that," okay, then he's not going to stop.
But if you're worried about provoking him, that's the problem that gets him into the first place. That's the way I look at it.
But if you
because-
look back, so at, say, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, we had interest in Kuwait, so therefore we helped drive the Iraqi forces back. We never truly invaded Iraq. We let it be, right? But Saddam stayed in power. Then everything again fell apart. So does history repeat
No.
itself?
Yeah, but I think
from the
Putin-
Russian standpoint,
Putin,
where
though-
Putin has
Yeah, but Saddam-
gone after Ukraine.
Yeah.
We push him back.
But see,
but now what?
All we're
Saddam-
hearing
yeah.
is that the media in Russia is talking about Nazis.
Yeah, yeah.
We're liberating the. Wait a minute. 17,000 Russians died. How do you hide that?
That's why you don't bring the bodies back.
Yeah, but Ed,
You could-
if all of a sudden your kid's missing,
But again, who's going to? Again, but this is the whole horror of warfare, especially in a country that doesn't respect its own soldiers. And that's what I was going to get to before, is when you look at how they were ill-supplied, ill-fed, and whatever, they go to a village, they're basically raiding the grocery stores to eat, and the liquor stores and everything else to drink. And they're in there on a mission that they were told they were going in a training exercise, and now they're in a country which is not. There isn't much difference between a Ukrainian and a Russian as far as culturally. I mean, you could talk about a border, but here's a young conscript going, that looks like my grandmother.
but the conscript shooting women and children. I mean, there's got to be
Well, we're
some.
not sure that what they're saying now is this group that was sent in there, especially in those areas, up in the north there, was done by a lieutenant colonel or a general, whatever, who specializes. So it looks to me like his forces were regular forces who came in.
Well, they said they brought in mercenaries from
Well,
Syria and
Yeah.
that were ruthless.
Yeah, they brought in also the Ukrainians brought in the Chechens who don't like the Russians.
Yeah.
So it's been one of these.
Because, well, the Ukrainian people were standing up to the Russians. Obviously, many have had to flee, but so what's the tactic? Now the tactic changes to try to break the spirits, break the back.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's, that comes with a price, right, of the women and children, which is totally terrible. And but
But
will
Chris-
the Ukrainian people still push back?
You can
They
break
don't.
my back when I'm fighting for your house.
Exact. Yep.
You can't break my back when I'm fighting for my house.
Yes.
Because I got nowhere to go.
I agree.
This is, this is my.
I want the Ukrainian
No.
people to stand up
Well,
and
they are
keep fighting back.
And
But again,
they probably
but it's-
do it in a way that.
Right, but it's coming to by doing what they're doing, just the civilians standing up and doing what they can to fight back, the price they're paying is
I don't think
by the mercenaries that are coming through, right?
So
By
what
everybody.
happens?
Yeah.
Eventually, this will end. One way or another, this is going to end.
I think it'll be a stalemate. That's what.
What do we do then?
Well, we obviously could. The question is, that's why I said a few minutes ago, the end game for Putin isn't good, because there's not going to be any kind of treaty. It'll be. I mean, again, almost when you say talk is cheap, it's almost like makes me feel bad to even be talking about this, because they're over there and we're in an armchair here going whatever. But the thing is, and that's scary, because the thing is, to me, I think it'll be a stalemate. The sanctions are still on. Obviously, the documentation of the war crimes and atrocities. I mean, Mariupol now, they're saying the Russians are burning the bodies to just. It's like, this is like right out of World War II. But the cases are going to be there. Putin, he may be a rich man, but he's not going anywhere outside of Russia. The oligarchs aren't going anywhere. So what's the net gain for him? Nothing. Now, you go from a more cynical point of view, the defense analyses and all the people like the Chinese and the West are realizing the weakness of the Russian army, the real bad weakness, and you're seeing the West flood in state-of-the-art weapons. The British are sending missile systems in there, handheld and whatever, that are amazing, and this is almost like a test
Well,
thing of
even the
modern
Turkish
warfare.
drones.
Yes.
I mean, you sit there now, of course, as they look further down the line, you say, okay, you've now put tens of thousands of missiles, Stingers and all. How are you going to control them? That they don't, when the war's over.
Well, if the Ukrainians are going the way they will, hopefully they'll
use
their
them all?
They'll use their last one, because that was the whole thing with when the Soviet Union collapsed. Many Russian generals weren't getting paid, and all
They were selling all the weapons.
the machine guns and everything else they were on the world market. But they're saying that some of the conscripts actually are using World War II rifles. That's how literally they lack weapons in Russia.
Of that,
Yeah.
modern
It's
technology.
amazing.
But the score is too. Also, it just seems on every life scale, the life expectancy in Russia is declining. Putin is also looking at a thing of a country that its birth rates collapsed. you're looking at what percentage of those Russian soldiers are from the republics. So you're looking at the whole thing. But I think we should segue to Washington and figure out
Well, let me ask a basic question as we segue. 18 months after the last election, are we better off than we were before?
On every scale, I would have to say no, and I think that's certainly on inflation, no. The border, absolutely not. The border is a disaster. It was coming under control under the last administration. And I won't use the name Trump because we have people with Trump derangement syndrome around sometime. But the thing is, it was coming under control. Obviously, the economy was in the depths of, when COVID hit, but was bouncing out nicely. I think on the international thing, I think, Biden, obviously Trump wasn't liked in Europe because he told NATO, pay up. And isn't he been proven true is that, oh yeah, you want us to defend you, well, fess up the money to help us because we're not going to front it alone while they basically say things. So on those three, I'd say, I mean, there's obviously
let's
a myriad.
look at those, but is this Jimmy Carter Rev 2?
I don't know if
I mean, I think of the
Before my
last.
time, I can't
Yes,
speak.
that was
I
just gonna
can't
say,
speak to
I
that
gotta
one.
say.
I apologize. So I'd have to.
I
sit
just
back,
think
but-
of the inflation back during Carter. I mean, all the pieces seem.
But
to,
also the Carter seemed to think there was something wrong with the country for not liking the Malays of America or whatever. So I don't know if Biden is there, but the problem is I think they'll switch back to Putin. I think after Putin met Biden at that disastrous summit meeting, I think Putin quickly figured out. I don't think Biden's at the top of his game, to say the least. That's in Putin's mind, and he seemed to be, what do you want to call it? Disjointed, uncoordinated.
Putin respects power.
And
Right.
and Biden projects weakness.
Right.
That's
I mean,
the way to
you'd
put it.
sit there and say, if Trump was at the helm when Putin invaded, it's scary, but I don't know what he would have done. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Biden, we know what he would do. He did it. Right
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
playbook.
I mean, I think the Ukraine was always a sore point for Trump because in the 2016 election, the Ukrainians were very much for Clinton. Their embassy was very much pro-Clinton. The whole thing about the Burisma, where the Hunter Biden was involved in, which we'll get into a while, the first of his many shenanigans. But so Trump had a grudge against the then Ukrainian government. And then, as you remember, the whole grounds of the impeachment was calling up the president now over there and talking about, give me information on Hunter Biden. So that was the pretext for the first or second impeachment trial. So it's very interesting, but I don't know. I think though that just worldwide, Biden just doesn't project a confidence or what I call. He seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I look at it the way the American economy is now. The middle class is being ultra taxed, right? I'm paying more for gas. I'm paying more for my goods. My grocery bill has gone up. Everything around me has gone up. And that to me is just more of a tax on the middle class.
Of course, it is.
Right. So certainly, is it a promotion of electric vehicles by making gas go up, shutting down a pipeline, and now with conflict in the world,
But if
gas
you
prices have
listen
gone up.
to our liberal brethren, they'll say Biden had nothing to do with inflation.
Okay. Well, I can tell them the Brooklyn Bridge is still for sale, and I'll take bids for it. I mean, if they want to. I mean, you can't have all these things sitting up. It's another thing that's interesting is when they talk about, just to segue a minute to Putin again, they talk about Europe's dependence on gas and whatever. Well, how many countries, I think even you might know a little more than me, how many nuclear plants did Germany shut down in its race to go? Because they, like France and the Ukraine, they had a lot of nuclear power plants. France has got a.
Well, France was ahead of everybody.
Yeah. And but I mean, how many did Germany shut down in this race to go, and then in turn become more dependent on Russian gas?
And I would argue that the previous administration, the economy was good. COVID hit, the economy still moved along at a good pace, right? We didn't see this level of inflation. COVID is, in a sense, not over, but it's at a far different spot than it was a year ago. Yet our economy inflation has gone completely haywire.
Yeah.
So to not say that it's an administration aspect, that
But would
to
you
me,
buy
I
onto,
can't buy into that.
let's say Biden had nothing to do with it, but at the end of the day today, I don't feel that my money is worth as much as it was 2 years ago.
It isn't.
Right? Now, you can sit there and say, well, it had nothing to do with the president, but in industry, the CEO reaps the rewards
Well,
when things are good,
right.
but takes the responsibility when they're not.
Let me use the liberals' own argument against them, because if anything, if they want to blame the Trump era, okay, the Democrats who control the House, the Republicans, I think, control the Senate narrowly, and you had Trump. They were racing against themselves to pump more money into the economy, give $600 an extra week in unemployment to people. So, to me, the liberals have always been spend, spend, spend. Well, they did. So the liberals should be very happy with what the House, the Republicans, and the Senate, and Trump did, because Trump also was behind it too. So in a way, but what I'm trying to say is, I guess in my awkward way, is Trump used almost liberal theology or philosophy, and the result is massive inflation because they pumped so much money into the economy. So they can't have it each way. They can't blame Trump for doing the policies that they would approve of.
Yeah, but now everybody's screaming that
You know what I'm saying?
my paycheck,
Yeah.
it's not increasing at the rate of inflation, so I'm losing money every year.
Well,
That's a fact. You know, at the end of the day,
and the fact is that because of all of this, the cost of an apartment if people are renting, or a cost, let's just say, you know, we take homes. If we all own homes, we're in a very privileged position, okay? Let's put it that way. But the people who are in the position of trying to rent to own, or whatever, now rents have gone through the roof. They've even gone through the roof in Milford. They've gone through the roof in everywhere. So you wonder what percentage of people's monthly pay they're paying in rent and utilities. And when it gets up to a certain level, you know, now you're cutting back on other things. So it's a real
that's
thing.
always
Yeah.
the balancing act
Yeah.
that we have when we're looking at budgets for Milford, $120+ million. Yes, we want to take care of the new families coming in. Yes, we want to take care of our children. But then you've got people living on $1,500, $1,800 a
Yeah.
month Social Security. An apartment in Milford now is like $1,300, $1,400.
Well, I mean, if we want to let's stay out of Milford, the politics about for a while, but taxes in Milford, property taxes in Milford have gone through the roof. And now we can say they were cheaper and more gone up in other towns, but all I'm talking about is Milford, Mass. With all the money we have in the bank, in our different funds or whatever, to me, I don't feel that. But that, again, you're part of the finance committee thing, so we'll get into that discussion later. But if we stay in inflation in the economy, I mean, I just think you said which areas you thought we were worse off. I listed three. You could go to, I guess you could
One
go
of
to,
the arguments is Biden had nothing to do
well,
with gas prices, that they were going up on their own.
But what has Biden done to actually help gas prices go down?
He
Besides
tapped the strategic.
besides
that's
that,
recently.
right?
That's
but
a gesture.
let's go back to
That's
one
a
of his
gesture.
first 100 days of office when he shut down the Keystone Pipeline.
Yes.
So if that Keystone Pipeline was still progressing, would there be less volatility in our gas prices right now?
And
See, I look at it a little different, Chris. We were a net exporter,
under Trump.
okay? We got a new candidate, became president, who said, I am going to wage war on fossil fuels.
So the permits to explore and the permits to drill dried up.
Well, not the permits to explore.
Well, but let's just, let's
you
just
could rent it, you
yes,
just
but
couldn't drill on
but
it.
let's just. But no one's going to do that if they can't get to the other way, because you'd be fired as a CEO.
Well, of course.
But the thing is, and the other thing is, which you might want to bring up to your liberal colleagues, is now Canada is our number one supplier of oil. Okay,
Right.
after our own. So now this shipped in by rail.
Right.
What is more dangerous for a spill than a train
Right,
to say,
train.
well, I know I'm asking you.
But it's not
no,
even
wait,
danger.
No, but I'm
But-
asking you about a pipeline or the train.
But you turn around and say, what uses more energy to transport, a pipeline or a
But can you
train?
imagine?
Right.
And you don't even hear this from the people because the press, largely the press has their own agenda and they're never going to point out anything that's
But do you
there.
think the progressive wing views gas prices? I paid $4.30, $4.40 a gallon for my gas today. Do you think they look at that as a bad thing?
I really don't. Honestly, I'm not interested in what they think because there's a particular reason.
Yeah.
Because they are so first of all, they're so unrepresentative. I mean, Elon Musk described completely like the other day the woke culture when he talked about Twitter and whatever. He said a humorless group of people who basically practice putting people down because they don't like people. Now that may be a simplest thing, but think about the progressive agenda because the 3 or 4 congresswomen, the squad, they're doing very well financially with all their media spotlight or whatever. But I don't know. I don't think they care because I think honestly it's almost like what do you want to call it? A strange self-righteousness.
Well, I heard
Yeah,
the
I guess.
comment that this is large increases in gas prices are good because it'll force people to go to electric cars.
Great. So, but where's the energy where do we harness the energy to power the electric
Yeah.
cars?
To make the electricity?
Right,
And-
because
and-
around
yeah.
here, we only have so much sunshine during the day, right? And what happens when it's a cloudy day for a few days? Does everybody stay home from work because we can't power our cars?
Yes.
Or do we have to store that someplace in a lithium-ion battery?
Which are made from China.
Which, yeah, and if anybody's ever seen what a lithium mine looks like, it seems to me it's far more devastating
Yeah.
on the environment
Well,
than
we
it is
look
to
up the
drill
coal
oil.
strip mines in West Virginia and all,
Yeah.
with horror, with those huge holes.
Right.
And then you start looking out west at what a lithium mine is. It's
Yeah.
just as bad or worse.
It's just a big,
But
yeah,
it-
it's
again,
a big hole in the
It's
ground.
generations that have lost touch with their grandparents' working roots. And the thing is, so as I think before the show was on, I mentioned that in the Midwest, I think it was the state of Missouri, power averages 13 cents a kilowatt hour over the year. Summer, it's 33 cents here. Plus, that was 33 cents before the increases. So how do we ever going to compete with industry? How would you locate a plant here as opposed to the south or whatever? So what is the reason that our power is so high? First of all, they defeated every effort to bring Quebec power down, which is hydropower, a nice clean source of power. So when you get into this catch-22 of this wokeism and this progressivism, it seems to be almost stifling.
Well,
Stifling
the killer
whole
to me
thing.
is, okay, being electric is cleaner, it's great, it's wonderful.
Right.
But how do I get there if I'm struggling to make ends meet? And, we got a lot of people that are doing well in Milford,
Well,
in the area, and we got a lot of people that are okay.
but
But all of a sudden, I'm paying twice as much to fill my car, and I don't have an option. If I need to make money, I need to drive to work.
Right.
Because there's no mass transportation. When I lived in Paris, I didn't have a car for 2 years because there was a
Well,
metro
yeah.
stop every other
Yeah.
block.
yeah, but again,
We don't have that option.
But you're in I guess the idea that you would even suggest that to people, not you, but they would say, well, just get whatever, just shows you the arrogance of it all. Because the last time I looked, you were able to make free choices in the United States. I guess they don't want to do that.
Well, I mean, the other thing is you look at the average person, blue-collar worker. Not everybody can just go out and say, oh, I'll put 60 grand towards an electric car. I'll get rid of my car.
Exactly.
But that's the thing is, I guess, the progressive woke folks don't understand. That is obvious to every person who lives it except them. Because you have a very good thought, but everyone in their house, when they're making that decision, goes, for God's sakes, of course I don't have the money for that. So it's a decision. So this is why you wonder who these people pretend to represent, because, as I said, it's a scary thing that's going on. But let's go to a couple of other things that the agenda.
But
Obviously,
Ed, you look at things like crime.
What crime?
I was reading
Yeah.
that Chicago is in the middle of a crime spree.
Mhm.
Yet the mayor of Chicago, who was all for defunding the police, has 75 policemen assigned to her security.
Yeah, she had I believe 24. Then
It was
they
23.
added these extras. I guess at her suggestion.
But wait a minute,
Are you that
how
disliked
can
that you
you
have to have a?
take
Right.
75? Now,
Yep.
24/7 protection, I understand
Yeah,
it's going to be, more than 2 or 3 people. But
70?
75?
Well, I think when you look at it too, the number of people that are retiring early from in police departments, the amount of people that are not going into the police into the role as a police officer, right? Because we're not looking at them in that same light that we did 5, 10, 15 years ago, right? They've become the enemy.
That's
Right?
part of
They're
it.
not respected like
Yeah.
they were.
That's
once
part of
were.
the success of the woke movement is
Right.
that they assume our freedoms and our safety or whatever. For example, you just saw the Black Lives Matter founders purchased a $6 million mansion somewhere, and then now the state of California is investigating their finances and fundraising. Well, wouldn't it be nice to do a forensic audit or some kind of audit of their finances to see, because on the heels of a tragedy, the murder of George Floyd, they collected from a lot of companies, a lot of people, a lot of money. Now, to me, I guess I'm naive. They have a responsibility to use it to promote, racial understanding, education. What else? I mean, a lot of different things. Programs for inner city youth, all the things that are needed. Job training for people, whatever.
Right.
Instead,
Even closer to home, some
Yeah.
Massachusetts activists were saying they were
Yeah.
there was inappropriate use of the funds. So
you remember that
it's-
Hopkins story? Yeah.
It's it's across the
Yeah.
entire nation.
Yeah.
And it's two sides that need to come together and work together. And back to the administration, where is our current administration? Where are they at fostering any type of relationships there? And they're not.
No, they're stoking. In fact, it seems Biden's lodestar is I loathe Trump, and every decision he made I'm going to undo.
Right.
Now, okay, fine, but it's Trump was out
Yeah.
during the campaign. How many rallies did he do all through the election? Where was Biden?
Yeah, but Ed,
Well, where was he?
in Delaware,
Where was he in Delaware?
in this basement.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that. So we didn't think he was on a yacht or something.
That way
or
he didn't need 75 people to guard him.
Oh, well, he is okay. I guess that's one
But,
way to look
now
at it.
you start talking about that, and I'm reading the Times. I know it kills you that my afternoon,
You still
my
read that
lunch
rag?
paper is the Times.
Bird,
And
canary
they're
cage
actually
liner.
talking about that the laptop that Hunter Biden
Whose
had
laptop? Yeah.
was real.
No. The one that the New York Post should have got a Pulitzer Prize for finding, that they pretended was right. And how many leaders in our intelligence community with quotes said it was obviously Russian disinformation? Do you remember that?
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
They were like more than I think several dozen.
But see, I had the
experts.
same problem with Hunter Biden that I had with some of the Trump kids capitalizing on the name.
Well, but this seems to be this isn't the first time during the war in Kuwait and afterward. Biden's brother James, is it, became a sudden expert on housing in over there and who had never put up a home.
But
So
that was like Billy Beer when.
no, wait a minute, wait. But we're talking right now, though.
Okay.
And that's the point is, so when people go, well, everybody does it, or they deny it even happens. Now you get Hunter, who's, I mean, now he's become a world famous artist. I said, what was painting sell for? $500,000?
$500,000 for
yeah.
a painting.
Yeah.
What was it, cigarette ash on it or whatever? We don't even know. But then you see the pictures of him on the laptop that he had of the ladies he's with and everything else that was going on. I mean, you just wonder the susceptibility. People wondered about Trump being susceptible to blackmail, but here you have your son who's sort of running rampant and not too many limits on him. The way I look at it.
And I think more than anything, looking at there is a laptop and there are contents to that, but somehow it's not been considered of any validity.
Well, the media
of
decided
right,
because
right, or
yeah.
or any concern to how, concern to the Biden name.
No.
But to me, no, there's some really strong concerns, and that
There should
needs
have
to be
been-
gone through and made sure that the security of the American people were not in jeopardy.
If
now-
Trump were a little more deft politically, which he wasn't, he was very ham-handed. He should have named the minute this computer came out, he should have named a special prosecutor. Okay, some really good, if you want to say nonpartisan, but someone will go look at it. And of course, it's funding through the government, just like they did with other things, and it still would be going on. But here you have, now you're going to refer the Hunter Biden thing to the Justice Department, and you know who works in the Justice Department. So,
But now, are the conservatives, I hate to use this word, trumping up the idea that Joe Biden was linked to it? I mean, they just announced that one of Hunter Biden's Chinese benefactors asked Joe Biden to write a letter of recommendation to get their daughter into an Ivy League school.
yeah.
Coincidence?
But supposedly Biden didn't know anything about his son's dealings. So obviously he knew enough that the man he asked to do the letter for was involved with business with Hunter.
That's what I'm saying.
But
One of
they
Hunter's
alleged that
benefactors.
the father didn't know anything about his business things.
But how would you have the chutzpah to say, I don't know your father, you don't have it? Would you have him write a letter as President of the United States, and it would be nice on White House stationery, recommending my daughter? I mean,
We never met. However, I could say I don't even know what the person looks like or whatever.
Well, I think anybody that had issue with how Trump's children were being portrayed, then they should have the same issues with how Biden's son is working through the system here too, right? There was lots of questions about Donald Jr. and about Ivanka Trump and
'cause,
how
again,
they should be part of the
media.
administration, not part of the administration.
Yeah.
And what other dealings were business-wise. So now
Yeah.
Hunter Biden should be held
Yeah.
to that same
Oh
accountability.
no, that's that.
I know,
that'd be
but
unfair.
they should be.
But
right?
you almost hinted at what the liberal line might be, because you said, well, now are the conservatives trumping up something that Biden was involved? But see, they denied the very first thing that Hunter was even involved in something sketchy. So now, if it's proven Hunter was involved with something sketchy, their next line of defense would be, well, the president didn't know about it, but he obviously probably knew something was going on in the first place. So the lines of defense aren't seem to be working, because I think they're prepared to let Hunter fall on his sword or whatever it's going to be, because if there's overwhelming evidence, their next buttress will be, well, the president didn't know anything about it. Well, now we have these emails that show he did know something about it. So we'll see.
Yeah. And going back to that letter, is the president denying that letter even existed or came?
I don't know. It
across
just
his
came
desk?
up now because
Yeah.
they're going through the emails now, and I guess there's I guess, I mean, you'd be laughing and go, what is this guy doing? But I mean, the whole
layers
thing,
of the
yeah,
onion just keep peeling
Yeah.
them back.
Yeah, the whole thing when he was on that company in the Congo, what's the former the Belgian, what's it called now? Zaire?
The Republic, oh God, forget it. I
Republic of
won't say it
Zaire?
right.
The
Belgian
large-
Republic of the Congo got moved. I can't remember the
Yeah, but that's where that mine was, a heavy metal mine that was sold from the Americans to the Chinese, and Hunter was. Then you see the next Chinese connection with this energy company. So you're wondering. I mean, Putin is an enemy, but the ultimate enemy is China, and when you look at that, you're going,
The ultimate threat is
yes,
China.
yes, exactly.
I'm not sure that either one is any more of an enemy of the U.S.
Yeah. The
But
threat is yes.
the threat is much larger from China, in my mind,
Yep.
than from Russia.
Yeah, because of the economic might. Yep.
But now here's a silly question. Hillary Clinton seems to be trying to come back. Donald Trump never seems to go. Are they alive? I mean, why? If I was a liberal legislator, I wouldn't want to hear the word Trump. Just let him go away.
And I wouldn't want to hear Hillary either.
If I'm a Republican, well, maybe
No.
I do want to hear Hillary.
No, but you're saying no, but you're saying the same way. I don't think the Democrats, for many of them, her time has come and gone.
Right.
And that's why, so.
But
But
hasn't
yeah.
Trump's time come and
You would-
gone?
Yes, but
You
again,
would think, but the liberal media continues
they
to
need him.
to
Because
right.
what
they-
did Joe Biden say? He left
Right.
because he can't not say it because he can't help himself. I'd rather prefer to run against Trump. Well, of course you would.
Yeah.
Because you can dredge up all of the past thing, and Trump is the
right.
arguably.
Right, exactly. So many people disliked how Trump behaved
Yes.
in the White House, even though that his policies may have been beneficial to the economy. His behavior was such that it hurt him in that following election.
Yeah.
You know,
So
I
yeah,
always
so the
thought
liberal
he
media
was his own
keeps him-
worst enemy. If
Right.
he would have kept his mouth shut,
Well, we said that at the beginning.
But the
Everyone
liberal
said that.
media,
Even
by
his
keeping
supporters
him
say that.
relevant, right, like you're saying, liberal media keeps him relevant and,
They have to.
kind of suppresses that
and
Republican
even
Party
if I
by
don't like
keeping
the
connected.
guy, and I don't like what he stands for, and I don't like anything about him, I was paying a lot less for gas. I was paying a lot less for food.
No, that's a fantasy.
A lot less for your Dunkin' Donuts coffee.
That's a fantasy.
Now you're getting personal.
See, your Dunkin'
Now
Donuts
you're getting
coffee's-
personal when you
that-
start attacking my
see?
coffee.
Right? It's only going to go higher.
The thing,
So, yeah.
the thing is though, I guess the ultimate thing is this, not ultimate, in this, look at the whole system. I'm a person who's slightly younger than this whole gerontocracy that's running this whole crew. But, and even I say, I want leaders, younger leaders in their 40s or 50s or even 60s. When you have Hillary, Trump, Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, McConnell, Grassley, all 70, late 70s,
It's the
early 80s.
formaldehyde generation.
No,
They've been
but
pumped full of formaldehyde to survive.
the point is, they have power in the country, and it's stifling any movement from below because the fact is, there's only so many jobs. I mean, it'd be like being a Democrat in Massachusetts. There's so many of them. How do you jockey when a position comes open? It's holy war because the positions come open so seldom. You know, if a congressional seat comes open or a Senate seat, it's all hell breaks
Talk
loose.
about a holy war. I was just
Yeah.
listening this afternoon to Greg Abbott, the governor of
Texas.
Texas,
yeah.
where he started saying that he, as a Texan, is leading a defense of the U.S. border, that the Texas citizens are being overrun,
Yes.
and he's blaming Biden's policies, and he's scared to death that they're removing the COVID restrictions, so that's going to even, 17,000 people a day? It's
And
amazing.
by the way, but
Where do they
you
go?
would turn on MSNBC and CNN, you'd never see one story about it. They have a news blackout on it.
But I see them all on. See, to me,
No, wait a
I
minute.
get in the car in the morning, I turn on Fox News.
You already said, yeah,
halfway.
yeah.
I turn on CNN.
Yeah,
And somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, but the point is, the point is to deny a thing where 1.8 million people have come over the border as a problem in the country on a major network. You could say you may overemphasize it on Fox, but it's denial on the other side. Well,
But now, the amazing part is,
I challenge you to find
is
a
this
story.
guy going to get away with? He said
Yes.
the low water areas, he's going to put barbed wire or razor wire. He's going to put containers to make a pseudo wall.
Okay.
He's going to call out the troops, the National Guard.
Yeah.
But the one that amazed me is he said, I have in my hand a declaration that I'm going to instruct the head of, I think it's, like we have FEMA,
Texas.
there's a
Texas.
TEMA,
Yep.
Texas Emergency Management,
Yep.
to put all these immigrants that are being deposited on Texas soil onto buses and bus them to Washington, D.C.
I think that's terrible because most of them, they're flying to cities all over the country. So why should they be discriminated against? How many people do we know that even affects Milford? How many people do we know and how they got here that have affected everything? We've talked about the bursting enrollment in the school system. How did that happen? How do you get from last year 500 new children in the Milford schools in a system that was largely stagnant for many years? And who are they? And the question is,
Right.
yeah, it's a
what's-
relevant
well,
question.
but-
Because how many
what
Milford?
strain?
You know more than we
Yeah.
do.
Right.
But when you're adding a Brookside every year and a half,
Right. Yeah.
because 300 kids is an elementary school.
Right.
Even if they're not immigrants, when immigrants are moving into other towns around us, and those people are picking up and moving to Milford. I mean, this year, when you first came up with that request for budget, I almost choked.
Right.
$6 million incremental dollars.
But again,
Right.
I mean, thank God the state agreed and gave us
Right.
$7 million.
Yeah, and it's a whole, you can have a very, very long conversation, but yeah, just quickly, enrollment's up, and the enrollments requires more space, more teachers, and more specialized teachers. Yeah. And so that, again, and I've said it before, the open border comes at a cost,
Yep.
and we have to be willing to pay that price if we're going to continue to have the border open like it is.
Yeah,
and the people of Milford, if you want to get down and dirty, they have to pay that price.
Yeah.
Also, be willing to pay that
yeah,
price.
because the excuse before was when Obama was in, well, with the Democrats in the state, this is a federal problem, the border. Well, no, it isn't. When it comes home to roost in your town, it's your problem as well, because who's left footing the
You
bill?
remember that guy Tip O'Neill when he famously said all politics is local?
Bet your life.
You can say it's a federal problem, but when we've got to come up with $6 million extra dollars, and town meeting's always taking care of our kids.
Right.
But again, you're back to that balancing act. We got to be careful. We're at over $120 million of budget.
Yeah, but
request.
the question is taking care. The question is, it's one thing. I'm under the old-fashioned notion, I guess, is taking care of the kids, our kids. Well, when all of a sudden, in a state that was stagnant population-wise, certain areas of the state, cities, Milford's not alone, I'm sure Marlboro, Framingham, getting this burst of people and kids from basically countries that are, how they got here is another question.
Right.
So you have to wonder, taking care of the kids is one thing, but what about the whole, where do these 500 kids must represent how many thousand parents? It stands
Right.
to reason.
And
So where are they living in Milford, since the housing stock hasn't increased remarkably? Okay. Yes, you have homes that are being built by contractors. So where are these people living, and are we prepared for if some sort of tragedy hits, if there's overcrowding in the housing because of inspections or whatever, because people living together, in an overcrowded situation, rooming houses, as we found in Milford, people living in unsafe conditions. You have to wonder what the consequences are, because the 500 kids are just the iceberg above the water, and all the rest is the parents and whatever else, and the support that's needed. So you wonder what the future holds.
You had
Well, yeah, I was going to build upon that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the safety of all those new students that come into our community. They're only at school till 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and when they're not there on a Saturday and Sunday. So what are they going back to?
Yeah.
And what is the town's responsibility to ensure their safety at
Yes.
home,
Yep.
from an overcrowding standpoint,
everything.
from a cleanliness
Yeah, yeah,
standpoint,
exactly.
to making sure they're being fed appropriately. So where does the school's responsibility stop? Where does the town's
But Chris,
responsibility come in?
You're on the school committee. Your predecessors, when we were in school, were given the charge of educating us. You now have to raise some of the kids as well as educate.
Good point out.
100%.
When all of a sudden you say, where does it stop? Am I right in thinking that 50% of the kids in the school are on free lunch?
You're actually wrong. It's more than that.
So free lunch
So
means a family of 4 is making less than $34,000 a year.
right.
Well,
I mean,
Yeah.
If
you
you-
can't expect somebody on $34,000 to raise a family of 4.
well, you look at the and it's figures, statistics, and sometimes misleading. But if you look at every once in a while, they'll do the per capita family income of all the towns, and I was shocked once to see, in comparison to the towns around us, how low Milford was. Now, obviously, we're surrounded by Hopkinton, Holliston, some towns where there's a certain process there is to even be able to live there. You're a certain economic status or position, let's put it that way. But it was just amazing to see the difference. But it seems the problem is getting, not, I'm going to say worse, but it's getting larger. And we have to really consider, because we're in a great economic position now, but who's to say the pressures of this immigration aren't going to affect
But
the
see,
town?
that's the point. We've gone 14 years of a surplus. Mainly, there are a couple, 2-3% here, and $2-3 million a year.
Well-
last year we were very lucky at 11 million because of the federal money.
Right.
But eventually, as I'm saying, $34,000. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but
Of course it isn't.
you divide that by 4 people.
It's not even.
They need help.
Right.
This is Massachusetts, not
Right.
a
This
place
is not
else.
And if people,
West Virginia or
right,
someplace that you can live on that kind
right,
of
and
money.
if someone that's making $34,000 is living in downtown Milford, they still have to drive to the grocery store, and they have now they have to spend
of course.
$4.25 in gas per gallon of gas, and all the goods that were trucked in on diesel fuel, that diesel fuel went up, so now their prices are going up. So yeah, they're making $34,000, but inflation is going to affect them.
Inflation-
also.
yeah.
So do they eat,
Yeah, inflation
or do
affects.
they not because
Yeah.
they can't afford?
Well, but there
3
you
meals a
go.
day.
You sit there and say, if we don't help these kids,
Well,
Right.
with free lunch, with free breakfast,
Right.
some of these kids don't eat.
but the thing is, again,
Exactly.
But the thing is, that's where it's hard to look optimistically at all this material because inflation. We can worry about inflation, but for some people, it's a lot more than a worry, and that's always been the people at the edge of our society. And this is why, let's go back to the thing. So I guess we're going to wrap up. Most economic indicators, most social indicators, the border, particularly crime, we are certainly not better off than we were 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, under any
Chris?
stretch.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what is our current administration doing to help people? So if you're going to open the floodgates at the border, and we have jobs available because we know that help wanted ads are very plentiful out there, but where is that program? Where's that step-to-step process from the higher level, from our administration saying, okay, come on over the border, and here's how we're going to get you assimilated through, so you can support yourself. I don't see that, right?
No.
It's the bus stops, get off the bus, get off the plane, and good
Yep.
luck.
Yep.
Right? There's no
Yep.
there's no program.
Hopefully,
Right.
what some of the people have is a family connection, like our immigrant ancestors did before. Hopefully, but in many cases, no.
And like you say, where are they living? Well, I go back to when I was a kid and I had all these families living in my house because somebody had to help the Portuguese immigrants get started. A lot of these people are doing nothing more than our
I know.
fathers and mothers did. Only our fathers and mothers did it legally.
Yeah.
Right.
But as always, we could go on. We'll come back soon and see how everything is progressing. To our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for joining us tonight and listening to 2 old men and a young fellow. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. And let's all hope that our president is successful, because you can't hope for the leader of our country to not be successful. It's all about the infrastructure. It's all about everything we stand for. We had a pretty poor turnout of voting. Less than 10% of people turned out. Hopefully that will change, and you can make a choice or not. But as always, thank you again. Good night. May God bless.
Not too long since I've been home, been running all my life just